I would like to give a few quick tips that I have come up with for shotshell reloading. Some of them I've gotten from others, some of them you may have thought of, but I'm hoping that a few of these will be useful to you. So here we go. One of the first things that I do a lot of slug loading because it's cheap and fun, and I'm frustrated continually by the fact that almost all the recipes call for using a wad intended for 1 1/8 ounce. This one here is a Claybuster's equivalent to the AA12. I'm using this for two reasons. One, to demonstrate there's a whole bunch of room at the top. That's nice if you have powder and you need to trim the petals, but otherwise it's a wasted step. The others, notice, look at those petals fan out. That's because you don't want to use the Claybuster clone. The Winchester AA12 fits. Same for the Claybuster clones of the Federal wads. So what do you want to use? You want to use genuine Winchester or Federal and a few other brands of wads. And you want to use ones that are designed for either 7/8 ounce or 1 ounce. Like, check out this one. This is the Winchester AA12SL, commonly known as the silver or gray wad. And look at that. That is just right. Or this one right here, which is the same height. This is the Federal 12SL wad. Again, a 7/8 ounce or 1 ounce wad. And it's perfect. It also has a much stronger tail section, which will be, I think, comes in handy since we are dealing with a higher pressure load. It also has the advantage of sealing well in either straight or tapered holes, whereas the Winchester wads are designed for tapered holes and tend to get powder leakage if you use them in a straight hole. They also have a tendency to buckle if your compression range is right near their fail point. You either want them to consistently compress or consistently not compress. If your crimp height and compression that you need for a particular load is right on the buckle point, you get inconsistent crimps. So I prefer this springy Federal design for that reason. You need a good rolled final crimp if you have a lot of compression, or it will open up on you. Check and make sure it's still recording because I've been having problems. Okay, so we've established that. I am now going to push this AA12 wad into a hole, just for an example of my next trick. So I have no idea if I set that to the right height. Actually, I'll pull it up a little. So this is how you reload Buckshot quickly. You get a bottle that airsoft BBs come in. You open the hole up a little bit. You take a piece of fuel hose, slit the fuel hose, tape the fuel hose on. You take a piece of hose, I believe this is nominal 3/8 or flexible clear hose, a hard hose, possibly a nominal 5/16, and you do that. Notice I have a bolt. It's been a while since I've done this, but it's kind of awkward doing it in front of the camera. There we go. So every other time it would have been just a little flick, but it jams up. Notice I chose a diameter that doesn't allow these to stagger. That way I get the same count, and that counts exactly the pellet count I want every time. I have a line marked on there and a screw that I can dial it in or out a few pellets. This is for number 4 buck. You would need a larger size for larger buckshot sizes. I'll leave that to you to figure out which ones work exactly. Anyway, I've tested that many times. It's very fast to get an exact count. Usually it's just tip, shook, full. Now, with this, I can pour that in there, and I kind of usually give a little twist as I pour it. And most of the time, they'll nest in there evenly. Sometimes I'll have to do a little push, and I keep usually a rod to push. But if you'll notice there, can't really turn this sideways, they all nest naturally. And I find that 22 pellets will fit almost perfectly, or 21, in a 1 1/8 ounce wad, and 1400 feet per second is a really nice velocity for those. Find your own load data for pushing that weight at that velocity. Anyway, and that brings us to the next point, which is most of us who started recently probably have this book. it doesn't give a very broad range of loading options. It's mostly a lot of ways to make the same loads, more or less. This one is much better. This is RCBS's book rather than Lyman's 5th edition, and it has, you look up a hull, it tells you what page the load data is on. You find the load data for that hull and the weight of shot you want, and it's all in order of velocity. So you say, I'm going for this weight and this velocity. Oh look, here's the page with all of that. And you say, oh, there's a wad I have. And a little bit further up or down the page, they'll have the same load with a couple more or a couple less grains and the velocity of that. So you can see on paper the progression of the load. I find that to be very helpful. And so, for instance, this has almost no loads in the 1400 feet per second range, even though that's about ideal velocity for the particular load I want to make with number 4 buck. So, it's not very useful. Another difference between these, Lyman's book surprisingly has a very small number of load data for slugs, and those are all for Lyman slugs. I hate how all the manufacturers have huge gaps to try to avoid anything that they aren't the exclusive vendor of. RCBS is just as skimpy in that respect, but they have Lee slug data. Sadly, their loads are pretty comparable to the loads offered by Lee, so you're not really getting a lot of new information for that. But it does have a little bit better buckshot section. So that's that. Another thing that I find to be helpful is to keep everything consistent. You will be faster and you'll make less mistakes. I do everything with the same hand, so I'll have a bucket of holes on my left hand and my primers by my left hand, depending on what press I'm using. I'll have a mistake cup, so if something goes wrong, I just set it in the cup and I don't break my rhythm. I never stop a shell halfway through, I completely finish it. And another thing I have is I'll have a couple boxes that I load into as I go. And if some of them are a little bit ugly, I'll put them into one box and I'll shoot those myself, and I'll save the nice ones for when other people are around. I don't get very many mistakes anymore, but then, I don't know, just keep the best ones best. Masking tape makes great labels. I think it's absolutely ridiculous people who are reloading and go to Ballistic Products or whatever and buy a case of labels. I don't know about you, but I like to save money when I reload, and there's really no advantage to a lot of these things. Like, I don't need a special little metal bracket to get my loaded holes quickly into the box. I suppose I'd use one if you gave it to me, but that's just, I don't get it. Anyway, hopefully that will be helpful to you, and have a good day.